Welcome to the channel. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Join me on today's video where we will be reviewing the San Martin SN009 G or the GS Homage. Now I unboxed this not too long ago, and in the unboxing my initial impression, this watch absolutely blew my mind. It is one of the nicest watches that I have handled, and the one thing that is extremely exceptional about this watch is just the level of finishing present. It has been finished so well. So allow me to take you guys through this review of this gorgeous watch. I'll go through all the details, the dimensions and the specifications. So wrist check for today. I am wearing the San Martin Sumo Homage. Now before I go any further into the review, I do want to take this moment to stop and shout out to a very good subscriber. I want to shout out to Ray. I believe he's in the USA, and his son Austin. Now Ray, ever since I did the video showing this on Aliexpress when this watch was first released, Ray has been on my case to get it in, to review it, and then which I eventually did. And you know, I want to give a shout out to his son, who's going to be 8 very soon. Fans of the channel, you know, even his son likes watches, and Ray's son states that the bezel action on this watch is the best that he's touched, and he really enjoys it, and in fact he enjoys the whole watch. So shout out to you, Ray, and your son Austin. Hope you're having a good day, and I hope you enjoy this video. And let's start off with dimensions and specifications. So the case diameter of this watch is 44 millimeters. You do have a lug to lug of 50.5 millimeters and a case thickness of 13.4. The overall weight of this watch is 183 grams, and I have removed 4 links from this. Now, even with such a weight and such dimensions, it actually does not weigh very large at all. I think the dimensions did put quite a few people off, but you know, it is that Seiko-esque dimensions that we have here, where the lug to lug still is around 50 millimeters, and the thickness is only 13.5. So these little dimensional features will allow it to fit much smaller wrists. I have a 6.5-inch wrist, and as you'll see on a wrist shot later on, I believe it fits my wrist perfectly fine. Having said that, the dimensions actually aren't too far off the Sumo Homage. So as you can see, that fits pretty well, and so will this. Now let's look at the specifications. So you have, of course, a full 316L stainless steel case construction, including the bezel, crown, case back and the bracelet. Now along with that, you do have a flat AR coated sapphire crystal, a black ceramic bezel insert with a illuminated pip at the 12, and a 120 click unidirectional diving bezel. You do also have 200 meters of water resistance, which is aided by the screw down case back and the screw down crown. Along with that, the movement that powers this watch is the hands out PT5000 movement, which is a Chinese clone of the Swiss ETA movement. Now I will link a video which I made just on the PT5000 movement. It is quite an incredible movement, a reasonably reliable and robust movement as well. So the specs on the movement are as follows. It's a 25 joule movement with a beat rate of 28,800 vibrations per hour, which gives you a beat rate of 8 ticks a second. Now along with that, it does also hack and wind. You do have an approximate power reserve of 38 hours, and the rated accuracy of this is plus or minus 12 seconds. Now how has the movement performed while it's been on my wrist? So on the time grapher, it came up at -2 or -3 seconds a day, and you can see the beat error is almost perfect. I believe it is at 0, and even through different positions it does not fluctuate. Now how does that translate in real life? I did time this watch on my wrist on a watch app, and that came back with a -2.6 seconds a day accuracy, and that is of course going through different temperatures, different wrist positions, you know, throughout the day, going about my daily business basically. So that is still very tight tolerances, really good and respectable accuracy from this movement. Now let's talk about price, because I've mentioned previously you can get very similar specs, if not exactly the same specs, for a lot less. Now this watch has 2 movement options. You do have a PT5000 movement, which will set you back around £280 or $380, and you do also have a Sellita SW200 movement, which is around $380 and around $500. So this is quite an expensive watch from Aliexpress, if not one of the most expensive watches out there, and especially on the San Martin store. And you know, generally in the homages that are kind of featured on this channel, this is probably again one of the most priciest. So you know, throughout this review, let's have a look and let's see if that cost, number one, is it justified, and does it really stand out from the rest of the crowd? So let's get into it and let's have a much closer look at the dial and some of the features that we have present in front of us. And you do have a mix of printed and applied features. Most of the dial does indeed have applied features. So below the 12 you will see that San Martin hex logo which has been applied, and if you take a closer look you will see some really fine details present on that logo. You do have the San Martin text which has been polished, and the frame around the hex is also polished. In between you do have this sort of sandblasted finish, and you also have applied hour markers across the dial. You do have a triangular marker below the 12, batons at the 6 and 9, and circular indices in between. Now what you will notice on these applied hour markers that there is a rather large polished frame around each marker. Now these are done immaculately. They do really make the indices sit quite proud, give them a very 3D effect. And you'll also notice, especially on the batons and the triangular markers, that the chamfering is done really well, and there's just a lot of detail gone into that dial. Now on top of that you do have printed text automatic 200 meters above the 6 o'clock, and the date frame at 3 o'clock does have a white line around it. The dial color itself, it is a kind of matte black, so it's not as dark as I would like to see it. And you also do have a plastic chapter ring with all the markers which have been printed. Now in terms of alignment, you know, the dial and the hour markers do sit central everywhere. The 6, 12 and all the individual little markers do line up really well, so that's really good. Now looking at the handset use, yes, it is quite close to the GS Diver, these type of hands I have used, and you can see they are fully brushed. There's no chamfering present on the hands, but you know, they are quite large. You do have a lot of lume applied on there, and with that polished second hand you'll see quite a larger lollipop at the end. But you do have this button top on that second hand which really does finish off that quite well, and you don't really see the hole for the pinion. So I think the dial has been constructed quite well, but there is quite a bit of room for improvement for me, which I'll cover in the summary. Now away from the dial, looking at the ceramic bezel insert, you know, the standard ceramic bezel insert, there is nothing overly special about this. Now San Martin have really sort of perfected this pip. As you can see, the pip sits really well within that triangle. You can see it's finished so well. It actually seems that it is part of the bezel, and on the bezel insert you've got these slightly thick white markers, which is quite similar again to the OG, and I don't really mind that. It gives it really good legibility, and that is also present on the dial. You know, very good in terms of legibility. Let's have a look at the construction of this gorgeous bezel. As per usual with San Martin, the bezel has been constructed to a very high degree. You can see this scalloping in between, really well done, and you can see itself, the bezel is fully brushed, really nicely done. And the bezel itself, it's got no play at all, whether it's lateral play, there's no bounce in it. And now let's check out the rotation. Perfect on the alignment, really good feel. I really like the sound as well, very consistent throughout the whole rotation. There's no hot spots in this bezel, and I'd say, you know, this isn't far from perfect. The bezel sound movement is quite subjective. I like mine slightly different to how you may like yours. However, you know, as a function, it's working really well. And it is very light and easy to operate. Not light that it's loose, but I can operate it just using my thumb here. And so they've done that really well. You do see some really high quality brush surfaces and a really good bit of craftsmanship from San Martin. Now let's go over to the side of the watch. Let's look at the case. Let's start off with the crown. You've got a fully polished crown, 3D shark logo, and I do really like this shark logo. You do have some really good machining present on the crown. The crown is a very good size, and it fits just really nice along these smaller crown guards. Very easy to operate, really smooth as well. But with this PT5000 movement, what I have noticed, when you are winding it, there is a bit of torque required. It is stiffer than a lot of the other movements out there. Let's turn the watch on its back and you'll see that same shark logo on the case back. Just let me focus here. Highly polished surface for that shark logo. Then you've got this sort of bead blasted finish in between. And the case, even though very plain, there's no specifications stamped on it, which I probably would have preferred to give it that, you know, OEM look. But you know, it is brushed really well, circular brushing, and then the outsides are polished. and ultimately it just looks good as it is, even though it is quite plain and simple. Now you do have full BGW9 lume present on the watch. As you can see, it is very bright, and you can see the lume is really well applied, no patchiness, and of course we expect nothing less from San Martin. The pip glowing, all the hour markers are glowing as well, and the handsets, as I said, ample amount of lume, and also on the counterweight of that second hand. Really impressive on the lume, but nothing unexpected from San Martin. Now let's look at the case, and you can see just along the tips, look at these lug tips, you can see this satinized brushing, very smooth. I can't get across to you guys how smooth this finishing is, and it's just so silky, and you know, as I said, satinized. It feels really soft. Now let's look at the actual case. As we move the case around, you'll find that it does have a beveled edge that goes around, which is fully polished, and also the side of the case is fully polished as well. Now this finishing is also present on the OG, so I can see why they've mirrored that. Really flawless and impeccable mirror finishing. You can just have a look how well it's done around the crown guards, and this case just feels so smooth in hand. You do have drill lugs as well, which is of course the preferred choice. It's what we all like, and just really immaculate finishing. And I like the brushing on the lug tips because that really does match the end links of the bracelet. It gives it that really nice finish because the finishing is the same across the lugs and the end links. I can't stress enough how well this is done. No sharp edges, and it's just been polished to pretty much perfection. Now let's talk about the bracelet. Now this is by far the standout feature for me, but let's start off by looking at the clasp. Now the first thing that you notice about the clasp, it immediately stands out as being so well finished. The quality of finishing is super high on this. You can just see this again, satinized brushing, and then how the light reflects off that San Martin logo. It's just flawless, right? You get the light shining off the polished San Martin text, and also bouncing off the edges around the hex logo, and also just looking across how that light sort of just slides over. This really soft brushing present on the clasp. I think it's just amazing and really well done. Also present on the clasp, you've got these beveled edges, which are highly polished again, and it really helps make that clasp stand out, and it fits in with the bracelet really well. Now along the clasp you do have 4 micro adjust, which is I think ample, and you've got these 2 spring pushers which are finished to match the clasp, fully brushed, and the same type of brushing present, so that detail and that quality is present throughout. You've got a milled clasp, and this does not have a flip lock, it's just a press lock clasp. Very satisfying click, and I've not had no issues with this, but I just love how the light reflects off this clasp. It's just so good to look at. Now moving on to the bracelet, you do have solid end links, and you've got all solid links, of course, this being a San Martin bracelet. And just have a look at these individual links. You'll see they are actually a 5-piece connection. Those 2 lines that you can see on either side of the center link, they are fully polished, but they are separate pieces which have been put together. This bracelet, as you can see on camera, the way that again that light just glides over this super smooth brushing present is absolutely fantastic. You do have a taper on the bracelet, which is starting at 22mm going down to 18mm at the clasp, and you do have a pin and collar system which keeps the links together. The pin and collar system is quite easy to do. It's one of the larger collars. It's not those tiny Seiko collars, so it is a lot better. You can already see the brushing present on the links and the polishing, but if I slightly rotate it, you'll see on the side of the links that they do have beveled edges present here, which have been highly polished. Now I've mentioned bracelets before and San Martin bracelets, and I felt some of them are still edgy. You do have a flat surface along the side and a flat surface on the top, but these links are also curved, as you can see, and also these bevel edges on the sides of the bracelet just make it feel just so much better, and the polished lip goes just towards the edges, and this bracelet from a distance away stands out so much, and it looks so good. It makes the watch look a lot more expensive than it actually is. To what I have in hand, this is the best bracelet that I have touched. Just exceptional polishing, exceptional brushing, and while I did have this on wrist, I felt myself touching the bracelet multiple times throughout the day. Anybody who has this model can definitely vouch for that. This is just something else when it comes to bracelets, and this is why I've said this is definitely a step above what's out there on Aliexpress. So here's the San Martin SN009 on my 6.5-inch wrist, and as I said, it doesn't look bad at all. I don't think it looks oversized. I think the curvature of the case makes it fit really well, and believe me when I say this, the finishing on the case and the bracelet makes this such a comfortable watch to wear. You can't feel any edginess. It's not like you're wearing a metal watch at all. It just feels so slick and very, very smooth. Now, I'm sure you've seen some really nice close-ups of the watch and everything else, and I've tried to not make any comments as I have reviewed this because I wanted to call it as I saw it. I want to save any other comments up into the summary, which is now. So to summarize on this watch, it is around £300, so around $280 for the PT5000 movement. Now, can you justify that cost? What I will say is, at the moment, there's nothing else on Aliexpress which has been finished this well. Now, ultimately, that is what we are paying for. I've said it before that, for the £50 or £60 mark, you can get same specs, right, minus the PT5000 movement. If you look at Philida, for example, and we look at the Thorn that I just recently did, you are getting high beat movements, and you're still getting the PT5000 on a No Time to Die homage for around £130. So, what is different about this watch where it's costing you almost double? The finishing, that's what really sets it apart. This is a case which has not been made on from China, in the sense that nobody else has produced it before. With the MM300s, the Sumo cases, etc., there's plenty of them around. So you can maybe just take the case there. You don't have to pay tooling costs, etc. Also, the handsets are kind of different to this watch, even though these hands are available out there, but the dimensions, the proportion of these hands is kind of different. And just the overall quality of the bezel, the whole case, crown, and this super bracelet, I think it is justified. It could have been possibly cheaper. If it was around the £250 mark or the $220 to $250, then yes, I'd say that would be a lot better. But bearing in mind, you've got mil-tap bracelets that will cost you over £100 very easy. But this bracelet will smash those mil-tap bracelets at the park. That has to be considered. On top of that, you've got San Martin QC. QC is one of those costs which you don't see it in a watch. However, it has happened. It's happened at most levels of this watch. I think they even do something to the movement. San Martin recently put out a bit of a promo video. They had someone do a tour of the factory, and you do have QC at crucial parts of this watch, and that comes across through feedback. There's hardly anything wrong with these watches. You do have issues, no doubt. I think everything has issues, but they do try their utmost best to give you a watch in perfect condition. You can see there's a lot of development that goes into the watches, and that is what's missing with most of your majority of your brands out there on AliExpress. They are not spending money in development. They're getting generic cases. That's why you see a lot of watches that are effectively very similar, if not exactly the same, with different brand names, but they do have, as you can see through my comparisons that I've done, they do have subtle features which are quite different, which leads to, again, finishing, how they've been machined and processed. So all that being said, it can be easily justifiable. Now, is it perfect? No, it's not perfect at all. Ultimately, nothing is really perfect. There's always room for improvement. So I have listed some OFIs, or opportunities for improvement, and I'll start with the first one. That is the bezel. Now, what do I think they can improve on the bezel? And this again goes back to how the watch feels in hand. So as you can feel, everything is so super smooth, super slick, very soft, and no edginess at all. And the first bit of edginess that you come across is when you touch the actual bezel. Instantly you feel just some edginess around here, and if I were to zoom in, you'll see what I'm talking about. Lines are rather crisp, very cleanly cut, but that also means that they've not been finished or rounded off. Now, don't get me wrong, the bezel is not sharp at all. It's not that edgy, but compared to the rest of the watch and how that feels in hand, that is the first bit of edginess that you come across. And you think, at this price point, I want the best from San Martin. I want the best they can give me, and your expectation now has doubled, right? Because of what you're paying for it, because you get so much more for less. So having said that, I think they could slightly just have polished the lip of the bezel, or just slightly smooth off these edges in between the scallops, or just added something there where when you felt it, you thought, okay, yeah, everything is just super smooth, really well finished. So that is probably the smallest issue that I have with the watch. The next couple of issues go around just the dial. Now, one of the things which you can't tell straight away is I think the hour markers are just slightly small. Now, when you compare that to the OG, yes, they are just a touch small, but we're talking 0.0 whatever, just a very slight difference. And if they were just that little bit bigger, it just makes it, just throws off the proportions just ever so slightly. I think they do need to make the hour markers that a little bit bigger, give them a bit more presence on the dial, because it is quite a big watch. But what I do love about the handset used is the proportions are really good. That second hand, to take a look, it is just nearly touching that chapter ring, and also with that mini hand, the tip is so close to the chapter ring, which I really like. And that's how I like the handsets to be on most watches, is so you can set the time really accurately. Now, that being said, the other issue that I do have with the watch is with the actual dial. Going back to price, you know, I'm paying near enough £300 for a watch from China, let's be real, with no real brand value. Now, that is a problem that most of the actual non-homage guys have, is because these watches don't really have any brand presence or value, so I think they should be a lot cheaper. So what I think they could have done with the dial is, for this price point, just have a look at the Sumo Homage. Just look how black that dial is. See this? I think SM say that it is enamel black. I don't know whether or not it's actually enamel, but you know, I do like that glossy dark black look. That is something which should have definitely been on this watch. I think if they put that gloss black dial, it'll match up with the bezel insert really well, and it would give it a much added presence, you know, on the dial that it does need. I feel the dial is slightly underwhelming. As I said, you can see this sort of matte black grayed out dial, but it really needs the dial from this 100%. And along with that, also at the date window, you know, it's pretty flat, it's just printed. I would like to see a beveled edge present, and or a frame. That's up to them. You could have a polished frame there, or just bevel the edges off just to make it look that much better. Because, you know, dials are not that expensive. The logo's done really well, but you know, the actual dials, there's not a lot of cost on them, and they could have made it just that little bit better. In my eyes, I think that would have made the watch as pretty close to perfect as it can be, and it would really make it pop in hand. Just that glossy black dial, as you can see, as I compare to this, look how good that looks in comparison, and that's what this needs in its current state. Again, still a very enjoyable watch. It is one of my favorite watches, and you know, I can wear it just like this. They're not deal breakers, the things I've mentioned. They are only opportunities for improvement, and I really do love this watch. I find it very difficult to take off. That's it for my review. I hope you guys enjoyed it and find it informative, and I will see you on the next video. Thank you for watching.